So we wanted like to say, hey, there's a broader picture. There's all these type of organizations. There's no judgment here, by the way. And let's represent all the engineering organizations that are out there and give them like some sort of framework to improve. And by the way, on the things that they want to improve.
Well, hey folks, welcome to a new type of Dev Interrupted episode. I'm your host for today, Connor Bronston. At LinearB, we have spent every day thinking about how to make developers' lives better. And we're going to start sharing some of that incredible research from our LinearB Labs team with the Dev Interrupted community. So one of the most important projects we've been doing has been diving into finding a way to understand what it looks like when dev teams work together at an elite level, when production, speed, and the team's business alignment are firing on all cylinders. By understanding how elite dev teams work, we can diagnose real, actionable ways to create a culture of continuous improvement within dev teams and enable your team to go from average to elite. It's why we have these conversations on Dev Interrupted with these elite leaders, and it's exactly what the best minds at LinearB have done with our engineering benchmarks report. So to talk through what we found is LinearB CEO and co-founder, Ori Keren. Ori, welcome back to the show.
Thank you, Connor.
Yeah, I really enjoyed kicking off our season 2 of Dev Interrupted with a conversation about LinearB's founding with you and Dan. It was a wonderful conversation. For anyone who missed it and wants more context into LinearB, definitely go check that out. That's episode 1 of season 2. And I'm really excited to dive more into measuring productivity with you because it's something that we have a clear opinion on at LinearB of how to compare teams and make sure that we are not burdening individual developers. So to see where the report on engineering benchmarks is going to take us, let's start with where we are by talking about the way engineering teams used to think about productivity and how it's measured. Like we've made it to the DORA era now of 2017, 2018, DORA metrics, obviously pulling from the book Accelerate, which I'm sure many folks in the audience are aware of. What has changed since Accelerate was first published in 2018?
Yeah. So first of all, from my perspective or from our perspective, it was really interesting to see companies coming more educated. It's almost like us at LinearB, we really have the mission to help engineering organizations like to measure themselves and to improve. So like every conversation would have started by, hey, like this is what you should be measuring. What are you measuring today? And it's almost like total like market education. And all of a sudden with this like DORA research and Accelerate, it's so fun to see that, engineering leaders are coming much more educated. I think that's the most significant thing, like awareness of what are the important things to measure. I think the group, behind DORA did a good job of like identifying the key metrics that you should be tracking. We'll talk about like the problems that they have there, but they identified and created like a very good understanding on like focusing on these like 4 key metrics to kind of understand the delivery cadence of an engineering org without damaging culture of engineering orgs and like with all the right like motivations in place. And that's like the key significant thing that changed because again, with lines of code and all that, KPIs that you choose will design your culture. And the previous one design culture where like it's a competition between the developers or
Right.
like gamifying the system. And what Dora did very good is like kind of like shaped like a culture of like, hey, this is team sports. Let's work together and improve the key Dora metrics.
And just for anyone in the audience who might not know what the DORA metrics are, I suspect everyone knows, but those are deployment frequency, lead time for change, mean time to recovery, and change failure rate. But at LinearB, we've found that going beyond these DORA metrics is important, actually. Ori, what made you and the team at LinearB decide that there needed to be more built on top of DORA metrics?
Yeah, that's a great question, and where I want to spend a lot of time on because there's a bunch of like answers to that. I think the first thing is that even if like if you analyze like the Dora group again, which did an amazing job in how they arrived like to these 4 metrics, this was more at the first level. This was more of like an assessment process. They would go in and ask you, hey, how much time you release on your key component. The first motivation for LinearB was, hey, let's productize this because want to wait for like, I don't know, 6 months, 3 months for the next asset. I want it to
Right. You don't
always,
just want a
want to be,
snapshot.
yeah, you want to be always on. So that's like the first thing, like when we built LinearB, we thought about it. Then, we identified a bunch of issues, like kind of like with the DORA metrics. So it's great. You come from like darkness to visibility once you like understand your DORA metric. And then there was this issue of what's next? How do I improve those? And yeah, I always compare it like to, we're running a business and there's like this key metric like ARR of a company. If you just sit and look at like, okay, my ARR number and wait for it like to improve, nothing will happen. You need to go earlier to like more like leading indicators
Right.
and leading KPIs to kind of like improve that metric. So
How do you get more leads, more opportunities for your team? Totally makes sense.
exactly. Increase demand, like everything, improve the actual execution. So even though DORA metrics were great, I think there was three problems that we identified. One, that there are like lagging indicators. Again, they prove a great point. If you're in good shape, there you're in good shape. But if you're not, now what? What do you need to do? So you need to go back to more like leading indicators and improve it. That's problem number one that kind of said, hey, we got to go beyond the DORA metrics. The second thing is that they lack business context. So I always compare this like to like an engine of a car. Let's say I execute amazing in all the DORA metrics. So like basically they measure like the cadence of delivery and the quality and everything is perfect. And I'm moving so fast, but I'm moving in the wrong direction.
Right.
Maybe
Still need a
like the
map.
company is saying, hey, you need to build A, but I'm moving towards like building B. Now, I do acknowledge that if you're moving in short cycles, you identify it fast that you're moving in the wrong direction usually, but
Totally.
still it like missed like the overall business context. So that's something else we wanted to add to that. And last but not least, I think like the third, I don't want to say it's low because again, it wasn't meant to DOR metrics are a great academic resource, but it's not like a product. But when we're building a product, we said, hey, if we want to really build a product around like improving this, the flaw that we have, an operational plan, like how to improve. And then one missing piece is like the developers. Because if you don't get the developers with a bottom up improvement that they care about the problems, you want to improve those like lead time for changes, deployment frequency, CFR, TTR, everything else. So those are like the elements that it was important for us like to put in there as part of like the engineering metrics initiative and other initiatives that we have in the company.
So it sounds like you kind of see this benchmarks report and the benchmarking that LinearB is doing as kind of like an update to accelerate or like the next step beyond it.
Yeah, I like to look at it as like layers, right? A great, research organization comes and like put like the foundation, the academic, like, in the research foundation. Now you need to build layers. You need to productize it if you really want to improve. You need to go deeper with some of like the research. So I see this as like another layer that will that will help you see where you are, but also help you like lead to improvement.
So let's dive into how LinearB's data science team actually conducted the study and the process behind it. A couple quick data points for people in the audience. This study covered 1,971 engineering teams and over 847,000 branches. That's a lot of data. What inspired the team to compile all of it?
Yeah, I think it was a bunch of things. So first of all, all the motivations that we spoke about before, like, right. So we had prospects and customers coming to us and say, great, you're helping us like see the metrics. Now, what's next? How do we improve them? So that's like one big motivation. There's also like feeling or, that there's a bunch of like, there's different organizations, there's high variance of like engineering teams. Every time I speak and we speak to like 5 to 10 engineering leaders a day, they're saying, yeah, great, DORA metrics, but my organization operates like that. And my business needs are like that. And so one of the other like great motivations was let's do something that's like brings it like down to earth, really concrete, really sees the high variance of the engineering organizations, how they behave and represent all of them. Because yeah, if you see that elite teams, elite 100 times a day and you just have this piece of information, you can be frustrated, right? It's like, I'm not there, so how do I get there? So we wanted like to say, hey, there's a broader picture. There's all these type of organizations. There's no judgment here, by the way. You can move from, from being good at one thing to being elite at one thing. And let's represent and all the engineering organizations that are out there and give them like some sort of framework to improve on, by the way, on the things that they want to improve. So that was like a big motivation, and we're fortunate enough that, a lot of customers are using our platform, both like the paid product, but also like the free tier of our product. And so the variance of the data that we see is very big. So those were the motivations, like to give something out there, like to represent all the teams almost and help them improve.
And in your own words, what would you say the engineering benchmark study is?
I think in very simple words, what the engineering benchmark study is like it takes all these pieces of data that you talked about. We divided it like to 4 groups: lead, strong, fair, and need focus. And it just sort of like a map for each squad or each engineering organization of, hey, if, by the way, we're not saying you should improve in this or you should improve in that. In my own words, it's like, here is a map for you. You choose on what to focus, and here are the steps for you to progress.
Like you talked about with the car earlier, it's a lot easier to get where you want to go if you actually know the right direction instead of, heading to point B, which when you want to get to point A, if we have that map of, hey, here's where we need to get to and how to get to from average to elite, getting to point A is a lot easier. That makes total sense. So all this amazing research is now known as the engineering metrics benchmarks. It's available at linearb.io. What were the high level takeaways from the research that you saw?
So first of all, I think what we've seen is that there's a lot of variance, like a lot of different engineering organization. It was really interesting. I had a talk. So we have an amazing data science team. Before like prepping for this call, I had like another conversation with them. One of the interesting things that we saw is that usually if I'm like, I don't know, elite in cycle time, for example, it doesn't necessarily mean that I'm elite in all the other categories. So one of the findings that we saw is like that there's very few, elite teams that are like great everywhere. So it's almost like us as humans. Everybody else, like all of us, had like points that we want to improve. We're probably good at one thing, but we want to improve in other thing. So that's I think like the first thing that we really saw like when we like did the research. The second thing is like related to the reactions that we got from engineering teams, and that one is also super interesting because basically what the engineering benchmark project does, it tells, at the end of the day, it tells you, hey, if you want elite teams operate, their cycle time is like under 2 days. And then there's numbers for it for each one of the metrics, and we're probably going to dive deeper and talk about the metrics in a second. So it raises a lot of emotions. That's the other thing that I've seen. And we just hosted a meetup, on a different topic, like here in LinearB, and you could immediately see every time there's a benchmark, there are emotions. Wait, why do you say that I need focus? And I keep saying to people, hey, the fact that you're in the need focus category doesn't mean that you need focus. You are the manager. You are the owner of what you choose to improve. All we're doing is like putting this framework in front of you. So you know where you are and giving you, of course, tools to improve, which is not less important. We're going to talk about those too. So those are like the reactions I see. A lot of emotions, by the way, strong and very positive emotions also. There was a lot of, okay, thank you very much. We've been waiting for this for so long. Like, because, when I was a VP of engineering, I remember my CEO was always asking me, okay, yeah, it seems that we're moving, get good. Okay, now I'm moving slowly. And I'm saying, hey, like, how do you know? Like, and he said, yeah, I talked to this company and I think they're moving fast. So that's a natural tendency of people like to kind of want to understand where we are in terms of benchmark. But I say, use the data wisely. The fact that you need focus, it doesn't mean that you need it. Mean focus if you think that you need to focus on improving that.
You could decide that it's more important to your team to try to move from strong to elite in a certain category versus focusing on something that we define as needs focus. I think that's a great point. Like, this is a way to understand the context of the industry and how your team stacks up and to identify potential pain points. But in the end, like, your business needs and your team's needs are different. Something that I think we should do is break down like the three major categories that we've grouped these benchmarks into. So the first one is kind of the delivery life cycle. So that's cycle time, like you mentioned, it's coding time, pickup time, review time, deploy time. Can you tell us a bit more about these?
Yeah. So maybe we first like let's define what they are and then talk
Perfect.
about like the numbers that we see there. So cycle time, often like in the DORA definition, it's called like lead time for changes. In a very simple way, it's like how much time it takes from when code is being committed until it's in production in the hands of customers. I call it the engineering supermetric. If you want to measure one thing, measure that. Now, inside, you have like four segments. Let's like specify them. Like coding time means like how much time it took me from like for the first commit until my PR is ready and I'm issuing it. And of course, there's flavor. Sometimes there's draft PRs, but let's stay in like on the main course where okay, I'm ready. The PR is up. That's coding time. Now, if you move a little bit to the right, there's like pickup time. Pickup time just says, okay, the PR is up. How much time it takes until somebody like starts to do review work on it? Put the first comment, approves it, say, hey, I'm gonna do something with it later. But just the first reaction that it gets, like it's starting to get big.
Well, and to
Let's
your
pick
point
up.
on that, Ori, we did another study at LinearB where we found that the average wait time, idle time for PRs is, I believe, 4 days.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the most amazing piece of data. I will have to pick one thing. So let's go over the segments and I'll tell you
Yeah,
the
I'm
like
distracting you. I'm
no,
distracting
no,
you.
it's fine. So the third thing is like review time. I mean, okay, the review started. Now we're gonna go back and forth and saying, "Hey, Connor, I think you should fix that." And you fix. And we say, "Hey, Ori, I don't think I should fix." We go back and forth. We finish. You merge code. That's the entire review time, including all the idle time that exists. Like maybe I don't know, like we should do. The day ended. We went like to chill, keep work-life balance. Came back to this the other day, but that's like a review time. Then at the end of the day, when the code is merged, you have like deploy time. How much time it took from when the code is merged until it's deployed. Now, all of this together, it's cycle time. And as for a question, on average, we're seeing, I'm going to round the numbers so it's going to be easy to
Sure.
digest, but 6 to 7 days is it's like a typical cycle time for companies. That's the average. And the data that like blew my mind is that 4 to 5 days out of that, it's not coding, which is like the most important thing like that us as developers we need to do. It's not a deployment because now you have CI/CD, they're taking care of that. It's like just making sure somebody is starting to review my PR and all the review process. So like 80% of this entire process is like pick up and review, which are idle most of the time. So that's why like when we saw that at LinearB, we decided, hey, we gotta help solve this problem. That's the most important problem that I think exists now for for engineering teams. It's almost like I saw a great talk yesterday that says you have a good pipeline that move fast. You have happy developers also.
Yes.
Developers want like to push stuff. If you have something that's lagging and waiting, you usually have set developers. So it's not just about like, hey, cycle time is important so we can deliver more features. It's impact directly on your health of your organization and how developers are happy, which is important these days.
I want to solve problems. Like, there's a ton of research around this. Like, people don't want to do meaningless work. They want to do work that matters. And I want to help solve problems for our business and for our customers. And if I'm creating something, if I'm coding something that just doesn't end up making it into production or sits for days and weeks, it's a really frustrating experience. And to your point, let's say I come back to it 5 days later after getting my review. I've already worked on a couple other things. Am I going to fully remember what I was doing even? There's a lot of like context switching that creates, and it probably damages the quality of work, I would think.
Yeah, context switch. is like the enemy here. And I'm not saying you can eliminate it 100%. You always have like this, again, because you just finished, like you issued a PR and you're probably going to move to your next thing. But if if we can, reduce dramatically the things that are waiting so long and are causing me all these context switches, and I'm not sure we're going to touch that later, but this is why in LinearB we built like a WorkerB. That's like the thing that I'm most proud, almost most proud of, like that we built in LinearB, and we can talk about it later. But the whole purpose of it is like to reduce context switches and to make sure like your PRs are being picked up and merge fast. And there's amazing, findings that a lot of the PRs are very small. They're like, one or two or three or even 5 lines of code in the same file, but they're just piled up on like these 10 or other 15 PRs that need to be reviewed. If I can just send you it like in one message to your IDE, to your Slack, and you can see, hey, that's all that changed. Yeah, I understand. Maybe I'll give you one comment, but maybe I'll approve it immediately. Just save like a lot of like this context switch and a lot of this like waiting time, and it improves productivity dramatically.
And to your point, that's been one of the big frustrations for our team and for you as a developer and engineering leader, for your co-founder Dan as a developer and engineering leader. And it's, I think, a really key reason that not only are we giving out these benchmarks reports saying, hey, here's how to improve, but we're also saying, great, we have a free tool. Go use WorkerB. Go help promote your PRs. Like, let's try to solve this problem for the industry. Something I think we should talk about is, we're a big fan of cycle time. You said it's like the one metric, if you had to pick one, this is the one you'd track. So what does an elite cycle time look like according to our engineering benchmarks research?
Yeah. So according to our research and the way we classify the elite, we look at all the teams that you talked about and all the branches and everything. And we try to say, okay, what's like the top 10%, right? An elite cycle time is when you go all the way from commit until the code is in production in less than 2 days, 48 hours. And organizations and teams are getting there, and they're getting even better than that. Some of them, it's not easy. There's a lot of like, again, other things you need to fix in order to get there. But that's like the number, the holy grail. This is like, if you want your cycle time to be under 2 days.
And to your point about how to get there, a lot of the key leading indicators of that fall into what we call our development workflow category of the engineering benchmark study. So deploy frequency, PR size, rework rate. Can you tell me a bit more about those and maybe how they affect cycle time?
Yeah. So my favorite two are like PR size and pickup time, actually. So PR size is probably the most significant one. If organizations are able to change, it's also a little bit easier to change the behavior there. So if you are able to move from the areas of like PRs that are like 1K changes or in those areas and get them all the way down to 200 or 225, I think that's like our benchmark for elite, like, in PR side. And code changes are basically like, additions and removals for like, and all that. What's going to happen is that everything that we just talked about in cycle time will improve, and all the other DORA metrics will improve because small PRs are being picked up and reviewed fast. By the way, also the coverage of the review is bigger, right? So if I'm giving you 200 lines like to read, you're going to read them, probably all of them. If it's like 1K, you're going to look at like a couple of things, probably say, what, like, I can't read this. Like, okay, ship it or looks good to me or whatever magic word as a team we have, like, okay, I just approved it. So because more code is being covered, quality improves. And we talked about the two DORA metrics that are kind of playing the quality area, change failure rate and MTTR. I love them because I love how they stretch the definition of quality. Quality was once bugs, but DORA metrics were kind of like saying, no, quality is beyond like the bugs into it. It's like how you release and like how you recover from the releases. Like CFR basically says, how many of your releases like are you rolling back? And MTTR says, okay, once you need to roll back, how fast do you do that? So if your PRs are small, your explosions in production will be small. You can recover fast from them. So PR size is the one like early indicator metrics that help you improve almost everything around your, DORA metrics and all. And pickup time is my favorite because it tells you the best story about the social chemistry in your team.
Mm.
It's like the one thing that if you want to understand if like people help each other or to what level, if you see teams that the pickup time is like, very low, below like, not more than 1 hour, 2 hours, it's amazing. And that means that the team is working together and they understand that this is team sports. And this is another metric that pushes almost everything like around cycle time to improve.
So it's a positive collaboration indicator.
Yeah, it's a positive collaboration indicator. Then combine it with a small PR, it's probably one review cycles and not 10. Then we just took the 5 days that we talked about. It's like
That's the main problem.
the main problem, and we shortened it like 2 hours. And this is how you get to like a cycle time of under 2 days.
Fantastic. What about deploy frequency and rework rate?
Yeah. So deploy frequency is kind of related to everything we just talked about. If you are working in small chunks, and not just in small chunks that are releasable, right? That you can, well, you need to kind of plan and break it into chunks that are releasable. Your deployment frequency will go up, and it's a great indicator that you're working in a good cadence, and you probably will improve again, like all the other metrics like CFR and BTR and all of that. In-work rate is really interesting, also known as code churn, meaning like just let's define it for a moment because there's sometimes people, I think there's some confusion around it sometimes. So basically, if I wrote code, it's merged into the main trunk, even released, and I'm refactoring it. And now when I'm saying refactor, people saying, wait, refactor is good. And I'm saying, yeah, refactor is amazing. If you're refactoring like a system, like it's been there for 6 months or 1 year and that's always be refactoring. That's a great mentality.
But not on code we just committed.
Yeah. And if it's on code we just committed, and by the way, it can happen on codes we just committed, but if it's on 50% of the code we just committed, or 100% of the code we just committed, and it's a repeating pattern, something is broken in our process. We have a quality problem, or maybe product and engineering are not aligned. Product is saying, hey, build this. Engineering is building something and say, oh, that's not what we want. Now we're refactoring or reworking this thing. So that's an important thing to distinguish. Rework is like I don't want to say, but it's the bad type of refactoring.
So
when it comes in high percent.
I think this relates back to that map conversation we had earlier of like, when you mentioned like, are product and engineering aligned? Are we going to point A together, or is one going to point B, one's going to point A? When you see that kind of negative communication between product and engineering, that's when you find high rework rates, as one example.
Exactly. That's when there's like miscommunication between product and engineering. That's one example. When there's a quality problems, there's almost like you'll see high rework rates in a specific microservice or repo. 1 month later, that's where you see the bugs coming in. It's almost like it's a very strong signal on like where you should be focusing your quality efforts.
And I'll say on the coding quality side, I really enjoyed the walkthrough we created recently about how to take these engineering benchmarks and move to improving coding quality. So for anyone here, we'll have links to all this in the description below, so you can read the whole report, see how we compiled it, and also figure out, okay, how do I take that next step of improving? So make sure to check that out after this episode. Ori, one more really important piece of this metrics conversation we need to have is about business alignment. We've talked about this a little bit, but it's great if engineering is doing their thing and building features, but if we're not aligned with product, if we're not aligned with the rest of the business, if the C-suite has a different opinion about the direction we should be going, there's still a problem within the organization. And beyond that, if engineering, let's say we are aligned, but we think, oh, we can do 10 times the number of features we can actually do, that is another problem. And it's going to be a problem for the whole team trying to report out to the rest of the business. And so the metric we have for that is planning accuracy. Can you talk me through why planning accuracy is so important and what it shows teams to do?
Yeah, this one is really important because, and that was going back to the beginning of our conversation, I think one of the missing pieces, or in the original DORA metrics, but I'll start with a short story. Like when I was again VP of engineering, VP of R&D, it was almost like I had conversations with my CEO, and it was almost like very hard to please, him and the sales org. At one point, I kind of like understood, hey, the best thing that I can do for my organization is being predictive. Even if like they want to release 20 features and say, no, we can release 10 features, but I deliver those 10 features with high probability, I get a lot of credit, and the organization also is much, much better aligned. That's so to me, planning accuracy is the one metric that kind of shows how you align with the business.
And it
Like
builds trust.
it builds trust. It shows that we're moving in the right direction. It just ties between like engineering KPI to business KPI, because sometimes, I'm not saying all the times, smart CEOs and smart business leaders kind of can go all the way and see the DORA metrics, and they like those indicators say, oh, we're operating great. But a lot of times they will say, okay, yeah, so we're listening a lot and the pipeline move fast, but where are the features? So this is kind of like the one metric or the one thing that shows I'm going to commit to delivering 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I want to be hitting a certain percentage of that. And we benchmark also that. It wasn't easy. Maybe there's a different like episode just to talk about, how you normalize all the data to kind of like heuristic result, because there's Kanban, there's Scrum, there's different type of Scrum. But still, we were able to normalize it and kind of like benchmark. And it might sound a little bit weird, but if you are hitting 80% and above of what you committed, you will be perceived as elite. That's an elite organization. Most of the engineering organizations are 60%, even 40, 50%, delivering on 50. It's not a big surprise for everybody in the industry, right? So we're saying we want to deliver. There's this like back and forth. The business said, hey, we need to deliver a lot. So the engineering org will overcommit. This is why the predictability is usually in the areas of like 50, 60%, sometimes 40 and even lower. And organizations that are able to get it into like the 80% and higher are elite, are considered in the elite category, and they're getting a lot of like respect and a lot of trust from organization. I would say one more thing, Connor, that everything that we just spoke about, small PRs, fast cycles, all of those things will help you get more predictable. And sometimes it's hard to like to connect between the two, but I'll just give an example. Let's say you work, and all of a sudden comes this PR with 2K changes. It throws you off, like, because then you approve it. You didn't read it through. You list a bug. You need to recover. Your MTTR is a little bit longer. You just spend 2 or 3 cycles of recovering from a problem. And if you're staying with small chunks and in a standard, way, you already know if I have this amount of tasks, I'm going to be predictable. So just improving on the DORA metrics that are important by looking at early indicators, right? Leading indicators at the end also lead like to better predictability. And that's like the important message, I think, of our research.
I think that's really crucial to mention. Let's get really granular on it. So what can companies do to kind of go from average to elite? You've mentioned a couple things. Let's think of some like action items. We talked about cycle time. Let's kind of like focus in on that to start with.
Yeah. So again, there's a bunch of things like I'll mention things like that we have in our product, but in general, I think the first is like, a conscious decision on what you want to improve, right? So understand where you are. Our product, for example, now took it to the next level. It will recommend you what do you need to focus on and what step can you take, right? So what step can you take? Even if you're like in strong, hey, you can move from lower bound of strong to the upper bound of strong. So first of all, I think it is important to kind of identify what do you want to focus on. What we always recommend is identifying those and putting goals for yourself, right? So I don't know, for example, you can say, okay, I'm not at 2 days of cycle times, 5 days. Let's just do this like baby step. Go from 5 days to 4.5 days. What can we do? Let's go back to the PR size that we talked about. I'm still not perfect. I'm at 500 code changes. Let's try to get the average down to 400. And there's great frameworks to do that. We have in LinearB this feature called team agreements or team goals, where you can, every team needs to decide, this is what I'm choosing to focus, and a machine learning model can recommend you what you should be focusing on. So that's one thing. The other thing is, like we said before, all of these problems, cycle time, if you look at it from the prism of a developer, they also suffer from that problem. Well, they might not care about, well, my cycle time is 5 days or 7 days. Again, if I'm honest, when I was a developer, I want to get my code merged,
Right.
but it's the same problem. I want to get my code merged fast. Like, yeah, I might not like see the actual metric and all of that. So there are great, features out there and packages out there. LinearB is not the only one that takes care of those problems. What can you do like to get your PR merged faster? So get your developers involved in this and don't come to them with a metric. Come to them and like, hey, we're taking initiative to get our PR merged faster. These are really, really actionable items. We almost think it at a very abstract level. Like at LinearB, we sometimes get philosophical about it. We say those are edges, right? We have edges that if there's going to be hive mind, right? So if I can improve DORA metrics at the IDE while I'm coding my PR. I really want to understand what's going to happen to it. If I can keep it small, if the IDE will help me kind of aim it to be small, that's going to be the best outcome that we can get. Or in Slack, where a lot of the developers live. So there's a bunch of things like teams can do, but I think it starts with identifying what we really want to improve, giving empowerment to the team to take the decision. Don't come top down as a leader. Say, hey, we gotta giving each team the power like to decide what they want to focus on, then set tangible goals like to improve. And again, there's great software that helps. LinearB is one of them, like to build a framework around that.
To your point, Ori, none of these things will improve just with metrics and visibility, right? We have to actually take action. And I think that the cycle time and like getting your code merged faster is a great example. A VP of engineering may care about the cycle time overall, and that's the metric they're looking at. But you can talk to your developers and your team leads and say, hey, we want to help you get your code merged faster. Let's make your life easier. Let's help us solve more problems here. We're going to see reciprocal benefits. Okay, let's maybe set some team goals or agreements around PR size. Maybe we set a pickup time goal related to that. Maybe we align to like a single responsibility principle around like each PR and branch does one thing. Or there are lots of other examples, right, of things that could be a problem. Like maybe you find, as you look at these metrics, that your sprints are unbalanced and teams don't have enough time to code and review. There's a lot of potential things you can do here. And the benchmarks report is designed to give you that framework. And then LinearB and other tools, as you pointed out, are here to help say, okay, here's how we're going to take you from average to elite. Here's how we're going to provide frameworks, working agreements, tools. And one tool I want to talk a little bit about, because I think it really relates to a lot of stuff you're talking about, is WorkerB. For anyone who doesn't know, what is WorkerB?
WorkerB is something we built in LinearB that is not looking at the metrics level, but looking at the same problems, but from a developer perspective. So my favorite two use cases are that, so WorkerB is a bot that can live on your Slack or Microsoft Teams or whatever like collaboration tool you use. It can live on your Git interface as a web extension, whether you use GitHub or whatever you use. And it can very soon also be in your IDE, which is amazing, because this is where I spend as a developer 80% of my time. And what WorkerB does is basically here to help me as a developer to get my code merged faster. So one classic use case is I'm issuing a PR. It's rather small because, I read everything around DORA and I'm educated and I'm trying to like work in small PRs. What WorkerB will do for me, it will help me promote this. It will find a good reviewer and it will also say, hey, you know what? It only takes 1 minute or 2 minutes like to review this PR. Now, if I'm the reviewer of that, it's very attractive to me to see it, because I can unblock somebody really fast, and it will add also sometimes the business context. Maybe it's a very important bug, so I'll jump on that first. When somebody reviewed my changes, I'm going to get a message just for me and say, hey, somebody like just gave you comments, and now I can review the PR and react to it. So that's one use case. The other use case, sometimes like a developer, I remember like when I was fixing bugs fast, I would just issue a PR and release it to production fast. And then all of a sudden my team leader would come, hey, you didn't open a Jira ticket about it. And like, there's always like, or the project manager. And that's it, even if they remember. But, and the Jira data is important because it shows a lot of like the things that we talked about, planning accuracy and all of that. But if the data integrity there is low, because there's no, we also took liberty and found that like 30 to 35% of the branches don't have like a Jira ticket related to them. So what WorkerB will do for me, it will just say, hey, Ori, you forgot to open a Jira ticket. Let me do that for you. And I'm just clicking one click, and it does all of that for me. So as a developer, it just saved me all of the like logging into Jira, opening a ticket, just, a thing that will take me 10 minutes and I do probably, I don't know, 10 to 15 times a day. It just saved me so much time. So I'm happy as a developer, and WorkerB is for developers. But also like my manager is probably happy because data is now has higher integrity and the reports are like reflecting more the reality that it should.
This is one of the ways that you can implement these team working agreements that we talked about of great, you figured out your benchmarks, you know where your team stacks. Your leadership can go talk to devs and say, hey, we want to help you merge faster. Here's some tooling to do it. I think this is a great example of like how to go from average to elite is you can identify where you're at. You can identify some of the pain points you want to focus on, and then you can use tooling to do that. And it doesn't have to be super expensive either. Like we have a free version of WorkerB that has some of these functionalities, including particularly PR side, WorkerB for pull requests. It's available free on the Chrome Web Store for download. And then we have like other tiers of capability if you're interested in learning more. You can go to linearb.io. And again, we'll have links in the description below. Another really important thing to think about if you want to talk about like people investment and kind of making changes about how to work to avoid things like unbalanced sprints and make sure all work is accounted for is our product delivery tracker tool. And it kind of gives us the context in the sprint you need, makes sure that all the issues being worked on are appropriately categorized. Can you give us a little more information about how PDT can help teams to improve their planning accuracy or other metrics?
So if WorkerB was like, for developers or team leaders, by the way, like again, team leader can, like you said, can define team goals, and developers sometimes with their motivation just want to get my VR merge faster. So WorkerB like focusing on that. The PDT, like the main, user of that is more like the engineering leader, but also the team leader. So what PDT can help you do is first of all identify your planning accuracy. Like in DORA, start with visibility. Just see where you are. And most of the organizations that don't have visibility, they start and they measure and they identify that they're like at 40, 50% usually. So that's the first thing it does for you. Then it takes you to the next level. We have a smart algorithm that kind of like identify when kind of like the content of the sprint was okay. We froze it. Sometimes in very disciplined organization, it's the first minute of the sprint, but sometimes, the first day or first couple of days, things are still moving. So we auto detect that. And from that moment, we freeze it, the content, and PDT identifies what was added after the iteration started. Sometimes it, a scope creep product is saying, no, we need to do also that, this and that. Sometimes it's like, bugs that are coming in the middle. Sometimes it's just we didn't do good enough planning and we identified there is more components that we need to touch. And what PDT helps you is identify at the end of the iteration how much you delivered from what you promised, your planning accuracy, and how much was added in the middle and what type of additions it was. So it enables you to run a very, very smart and data-driven retrospective to improve in the next iteration. So either commit for less, which is it's not a bad thing. We said predictability is what's important. Maybe you need to commit for less. Maybe you need to plan better. Maybe you need to have a talk with product. Hey, don't scope creep like all the time. Like just have a better refined story. It helps you identify what do you need to do to get more predictability. And if you tie it back also with those operational metrics, it's even better.
Fantastic. I know you and I are both obviously really excited about this, right? We have this better data now. We can show how teams stack up. We feel like there's tooling that's available to help make actual changes. And while the study premiered early this year, we're going to continue to update it and tell you every year, if not more regularly, hey, what's changing in the industry? How are teams stacking up? What does success look like? And continuing to provide opportunities to actually make that improvement happen. But I know there are some folks in the audience who maybe are skeptical. They're not convinced. They're wondering, how will these benchmarks actually improve our performance? Like, why should this matter to me? What would you say to those folks?
I say, first of all, like, don't choose to improve on something you don't believe in. If you're skeptical and say, I don't think it's going to help me improve, again, there's no replacement for great managers. You know better than every generalization. We're here to empower you with data and tools once you choose what you want to improve. That's the number one thing that I want to say. The second thing is like, at the end of the day, it's like, again, I was a developer before even being promoted like for a team lead for 8 years. I didn't want to move from like just programming all the time. We feel like again, it's an art, right? So
Right.
we want to be focused on building. So sometimes hard like to get this like, hey, you're coming with these numbers. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's an art, but it's also a science. There's also like best practices. They might know, not all of them like match your business case, which is fine. Like I told you, like you know better than everybody. But yeah, be open to the fact that there are standards, there are benchmarks of like best practices. So you should be using them. We're gonna keep on improving, like you said. We'll segment them better based on the size of the company and the industry and a lot of like great ideas and more metrics, more the leading indicator or the metrics, more around the business. So I think it will rise like the level of how much I can identify with the research. But yeah, that's what I would say. Like do only what you believe. Don't do stuff that you don't believe.
Totally. We're here to give you context. We're here to give you frameworks you can choose to apply. And then we're here to give you tools that you can use to either apply those frameworks, improve. But it's a suite of tools, it's a suite of opportunities, and you can pick and choose what's right for your team based on the context that you have that we don't.
Exactly. If you even don't want it, don't take anything. Just give your developers WorkerB and they merge their code faster. They're happy. That's even like a very good start. Very good starting
Absolutely.
point.
Well, Ori, our time is up, but it seems like we only just skimmed the surface of the takeaways that engineering teams can glean from the report. Where can listeners dive deeper on the report and see how their own teams fare based on these benchmarks?
Well, it's available on our website, right? At linearb.io. You can like see all the full get the full report there. We keep talking about it in Dev Interrupted in our podcast. We're going to cover more and more like aspects of it. It exists in our product. If you use the LinearB product, like when you choose, you don't have to. But if you choose on every metric that you look, you can turn it on and see where you are. And you can turn it back off if you don't feel good and you don't want to see it all the time.
Yes.
So those are like the areas that, I think like you can find it. Am I missing something, Connor? Can you find it other places?
Well, so the one thing I would say is, obviously we'll include a link to all this in the description below so you can go directly to the benchmarks report, understand more about it. But if you're a team lead listening to this, maybe your organization isn't using LinearB, you can still sign up for a free account for your team of up to 8 devs, and you can look at your own team metrics and benchmark them against the report, all for free. We want to give this information out because we think it's really important for the industry to understand. And so like I would just encourage team leads as well. You don't have to be the director or the VP of engineering to use this. You can be a team lead, come in and put your team on this, take a look at the metrics and kind of make your own decisions from there about how you want to approach it. We want to help you improve, and that's what's important to us, is that impact. Ori, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This has been fantastic. It's always great talking to you. And this is, one of my favorite topics. For anyone who's listening, if you really enjoyed this content, please be sure to let us know by leaving a rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. They help the show grow and enable us to keep on delivering great content to you and your team. And I'll just say, Ori, thanks again for coming on.
Thank you very much, Connor. This was fun.